Across the Aisle segment tonight, former Vice President and 2020 presidential candidate Joe Biden caught in a massive plagiarism scandal this week. In at least 5 separate places in Biden's newly released climate change plan, he copied, nearly verbatim, language from other people's work and did not credit them or cite them. This is not the first time Biden has gotten tripped up in a plagiarism scandal either. In 1988, Biden was forced to withdraw from the presidential race because he stole speeches from British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock. Even mainstream media networks like CNN and the Washington Post are criticizing Biden for the plagiarism. But where is their criticism, I may ask, for the real scandal, the radical content of Biden's climate change proposal? With me now to break this down, attorney and Democratic strategist Quinton Washington. Quinton, long time no see. Good to have you back.
Hey, Liz, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. Quinton, CNN has called Joe Biden after this plagiarism was revealed. They called him lazy, arrogant, and said this plagiarism showed a lack of leadership. Are they wrong?
Well, here's the question, right? And this is what I think is really interesting. Are we assuming Joe Biden is sitting there with a brother word processor typing this stuff up? No, someone on his campaign did it, and it got out. The question is, do we believe the policy of the plagiarism? And I think the policy is something where the discussion should be centered around, because if that's what he believes, then that's what we need to be talking about, as opposed to whether or not some staffer on his campaign ended up typing this, because I don't believe that he was the one that plagiarized this and read the stuff and typed it.
Right, and we'll talk about the policy in just a second, because I agree with you. I don't want this to distract us from the policy, but doesn't that show, a lack of leadership if that's an acceptable practice on your campaign? Because, for example, he's running for president. When you are president of the United States, you are responsible for the actions of your staff. You are the chief executive, and you're responsible for whether your staff breaks the law in your name or not. That's the first thing. And the second thing is I do understand how it's easy for politicians to blame staffers, because, of course, a staffer is doing the website. Joe Biden, there's no way he's doing that himself. I agree, but he himself has plagiarized before. He actually admitted in law school that he plagiarized a paper during his first year, and then he plagiarized in his 1988 presidential campaign. So clearly, this is not just, a low-level staffer. This is an association or a pattern that follows Joe Biden, this pattern of plagiarism.
Oh, no, listen, I'll agree that there's a pattern because of everything that you said is true. The issue, though, is that at each instance where these things are happening, what's the actual end result? He's saying that he has a policy. In 88, when he was talking about, when he lifted the speeches or claimed that he was marching with civil rights groups, et cetera, that didn't happen. But does that mean he doesn't support civil rights, or that he needs to withdraw from, seeking the presidency because of something that happened 20, 30 years ago? That I don't necessarily think. I do think that that needs to be addressed, and there needs to be tighter reins around him, surrounding what's put out. But how would he have known in the minutiae of the policy, whether it came from an advocacy group that had already written something like that before? He just wouldn't have known.
Well, if he doesn't know, then he doesn't know that much of what he's presenting to the people. It's more of like an apparatus thing versus an individual candidate knowing what they're talking about. I understand the argument coming from the left that they'd rather focus, on what he said. He's using experts and everything like that, but just cite it, or it's plagiarism. It violates copyright law. And especially in this day and age, when there's so much pirating of people's intellectual property, you'd think that a presidential candidate would be a little bit more mindful of that. But that being said, let's talk about the policy. Let's talk about this. His version, it's different than AOC's Green New Deal, somewhat different. It's very similar, but the goal is the same. The goal is the total elimination of all fossil fuels. Quinton, do you think that's realistic?
I think it's something we should strive for. If we're going to be Americans, then we have to be leaders of the thought and leaders in environmental policy and leaders of the world. And so because we know that renewable resources are going to come to an end at a certain point, then it's on us, and we're going to be the leaders of the free world, to chart a new course for the world. So in 1960, we sent somebody to the moon. Nobody thought that was possible, but we did it. Because we as Americans, if we believe in big deals and big ideas, then that's what we do. And so we want to move away from renewable energy to non-renewable. If we want to move from non-renewable energy to renewable energy, then I think that's something that we should strive for in the country.
Right, and I get that, but don't you think we have to look at the practical ramifications of a mandate like that? Because if we are mandated to eliminate all fossil fuels, how many jobs would be lost in our country?
Well, I think that you're looking at it as a zero-sum game, because part of what we're doing is, if this policy were put in place, people would be trained to work in the renewable energy sector that are coming from the non-renewable energy sector and from the non-renewable energy sector. So at that point, you have a retraining and you have people that have a skill set using that skill set.
But I'm not just talking about energy sector workers. I mean, that's true. There are many, probably millions of energy sector workers who would lose their jobs, at least thousands, if not millions. But I'm talking about other industries too, because if we eliminated fossil fuels entirely, there are estimates that say it could be up to, our utility rates could be up to 30% more than they are right now. I mean, this would essentially be a carbon tax as it was implemented, which would cause employers to have a much larger overhead, much more to pay, meaning they wouldn't be able to afford employees. So people not even in the energy industry would simply lose their jobs because their employers couldn't afford to pay for them. There's not really a one-to-one proposition there, like they could go into the new industry and find a job that was equitable to the old industry.
Well, see, here's the thing. I think it's important to talk about it from this perspective, right? There's a transition period of which the industries have to undergo. Because here's what we do know. We do know at a certain point that the non-renewable energy sources won't exist anymore. So the question is, do we get to that point and then we say we've got a problem, or do we do something courageous on the front end?
But how do you explain this to the person that's going to lose their job? How do you look them in the eye and say, and tell them they're going to lose their job and there's not another job for them in this transition period?
Oh, we don't say that because that's not the truth. Because remember, there's not going to be a day. Nobody's going to say within the next 3, 5, 10, 15 years, now we don't do this anymore at all whatsoever. What's going to happen is that the people that are in these sectors and the people that are, if you have an energy need of X amount of energy and you're going to stop doing it from fossil fuels and you're going to go to renewable energy sources, you transition where you come down from fossil fuels into more renewable energy sources, and that still meets the need to get you to the...
Right, but that's still going to cause people to lose their job. Listen, I'm all about renewable energy. I have no problem with that. I just think it should be market-driven and not mandated by government, because if it's mandated by government in the way that Joe Biden or AOC is presenting, then it's going to cause our economy to absolutely crash. It's going to cause so many people to lose their jobs. It's going to cause, taxes to skyrocket, your overhead, your utility bill to skyrocket. And the people that are going to be getting rich are, of course, the politicians. And I fundamentally distrust any plan structured like that. Quinton, I appreciate your insight. Thanks for being on the show.